Welcome to Crisis Compass Podcast, where we are a community that is dedicated to equipping faith leaders and church members with the tools necessary to be a support with those experiencing a crisis. My name is Dick Martinez. I am so honored to present this podcast. This is the first episode, so we're gonna do our best to keep you informed in a way that is a blessing, that gives you tools that you can use in your own faith communities and in your own homes. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing my dear friend, Crystal Beckman, RN. She is a nurse. She's been a nurse for 36 years, a graduate of North Park College in Chicago. She is a faith community nurse at the Church of God Seventh Day in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. She is the mother of two, wife of one. She is a godly woman. She is a prayer warrior. She is an educator. She is a healer. I introduce to you today Crystal Beckman. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me. Your introduction was way too kind. I'm just who I am.
Not at all, not at all. If there could have been some more things that I could have said, I would have said it. So, today's episode is called Whole Body, Whole Faith, Navigating Diabetes, Self-Care, and Crisis Support in the Church. And so, what I wanted to do was team up with a dear friend who is an RN, so we can kind of talk about how the body, mind, and soul, how those are all intertwined, and how if one area is hurting, it affects the other areas as well. And so, we're going to do, we'll have an interview. We'll have about 10 questions or so, and I look forward to diving into the topic today. So, are you ready, my
I
friend?
am.
Okay. So, my first question is, what led you to become a nurse and a diabetic educator?
Well, they were kind of two separate things. Um,
Okay.
I really always wanted to be a nurse. I don't even remember wanting to be anything else. Um, that was from a very young age. Oh, maybe opening my own restaurant was another one, but that quickly went away. Um, and so I always kind of had that in the back of my mind. When I was 8 years old, my very best friend in the whole world, uh, Karen, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And it was a very scary time
Hmm.
for us. Um, I didn't know if she was going to live or die. All I knew is that it was really scary. And as we moved through the disease somewhat together, I really felt the calling to learn about the disease, and kind of in my heart it was always like, why did they make me so afraid? Why does everybody have to be so scared? So it kind of spurred me along on the path to really provide knowledge to avoid fear. And that I think is my earliest beginning in how I moved through this path. Of course, nursing is one of those
Okay.
degrees that you can do anything with. And so, as I went through my nursing career, or my nursing education, pardon me, um, I didn't always focus on diabetes. But then, as
Okay.
my clinical patients started to sort of fall in place, they all seemed to have this one common thing, and that was diabetes. So suddenly I realized that perhaps someone, God, was telling me that maybe this should be my vocation. And so um, I just kind of always steered that direction.
Okay. Okay. It sounds like it's interesting because they're two different journeys, but they're still interlinked. So, how has your faith informed the way that you care for people that are journeying with chronic illness?
Well, I think, um, through my whole life, faith has been very important to me. I grew up in a strong Christian home and in a conservative Christian church. Um, as I went to college, I was able to study at North Park College, which is a church or a college run by the Evangelical Covenant Church. And faith was always interwoven in our studies and in our personal lives. So it really came very naturally for me to not separate them. That is how I live my life. I consider myself a spiritual person. I've tried out a couple denominations. That's just how life goes. Um, but I've always been a nurse. I mean, since I got my degree. And so I think that I can't really even imagine one without the other. I think mind, body, soul are all so interconnected, and having a spiritual background really allows me to um, explain things, I think, in a different way and put purpose and meaning to things that isn't always explained by just the science.
Okay. Okay. So, can you tell the listeners about what you do as a faith community nurse, and and what demographics do you serve in your
Well,
community?
that is quite a question. Um, Faith community nursing, also sometimes referred to as parish nursing, is probably not a new concept, but is being much more explored as we try to move healthcare kind of out of the clinical or hospital setting. We know that people have needs that um, are not always met, or maybe easier met at home. And I've
Hmm.
always maintained that church is not for the perfect people, it's for the hurting, it's for um, really all of us. And with that comes some medical issues. Currently, I am working with a primarily Latino population at
Hmm.
Iglesia de Dios. And I came to that church actually on your invitation. Um, Probably a little more conservative than I was used to, but once I started attending this church, um, I felt incredibly at home. Throughout my
Hmm.
life, I have always had a passion for Latino people. I always say I might look Irish, but my blood is Latino. Well, Latina, I guess. And my first friend when I was 5 years old was a little Latina girl who was in my community with her parents working in the fields. And I have multiple friends from Central and Latin America. And so this really felt like a natural fit for me. I do speak Spanish badly at times, but certainly can understand what people are saying. So right now, the role is evolving, and I always just say I will do whatever the need is. So it might find me in our church facilitating a CPR class. It might include doing blood pressure and blood sugar screenings. It might include putting various things on our Facebook page to keep people updated with maybe services in our community or recommendations or what have you. It might be the bulletin board that I put up monthly, or at least try to. This month it's focusing all on mental health and suicide prevention. It also might
Right.
include ministering to the kids as they go back to school. Maybe I do a little health talk. Uh, it might involve going to somebody's home and changing a dressing or finding a supply that they either can't afford or don't know how to obtain. It might just be providing um, care when somebody is being released from the hospital, uh, or
Mm.
finding supplies during the great formula shortage. I found myself searching and searching for formulas for some of our parishioners. So you just never know where I might be or what I might be doing in the church. In my other life too, I spend a lot of time doing some mission work with the Church of God. Seventh Day, in fact, we'll be heading off to Guatemala here in December, where I help
Okay.
coordinate the nursing team for our mission. I also have done some camp nursing, and I truly love that. Getting hot and sweaty with the kids is always fun. I give vaccines at a local pharmacy, so you just never know where you might find me.
Right, right. And you named about three, at least three different
Yeah.
contexts within the church that you serve as a nurse. So, um, and like you said, it's big and small things. So there's a huge need for professionals, especially medical professionals, to use their gifts within congregations.
Yeah, and
So,
I think
um,
that anytime you start working with a congregation or with a group of people, you really have to get to know those people first. And so I spent the first year or maybe year and a half really just connecting with people, getting to know them, visiting them in their homes, not under the auspices of being the nurse. They all knew I was, but really becoming
mhm,
a friend, becoming one of them, serving them dinner at the potluck, just really
mhm,
becoming a part of the community and developing that trust relationship. And now, slowly but surely, um, people are coming to me wanting expertise. My favorite times are when I'm in the grocery store and I run into one of our parishioners or maybe one of their family members or friends, because our community is large in our church. They
yes,
don't always show up at church, but they are still my community. I love when they come up to me and say, "Hey, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Um, can you help me figure out what kind of baby aspirin to buy or what kind of Pedialyte or what should I do?" And it's always such a pleasure. And I've even gotten to go to ultrasounds, which is so exciting. I was primarily a diabetes nurse, so being able to participate in these joyous events of our fairly young congregation is really fun too.
yes. So I'm gonna move into like talking about crisis and chronic illness. So can you share with people what does it mean to have a chronic illness? When somebody hears that, what does that
Well,
mean?
a chronic illness is any illness that is with us for a long period of time or maybe lifelong. For example, diabetes, which I'm most familiar with. I was a diabetes educator for, oh, I don't know, 29 years or something like that, um, in the hospital setting, but I also did outpatient clinics. Um, and so really got the opportunity to engage in my patients' lives long term. And of course, with diabetes, we also have other chronic diseases. Hypertension can be a chronic disease, congestive heart failure. Um, there's a plethora of them. Depression can be
Asthma.
a long term disease. You know, anything that is going to affect our way of life and way of thinking. COPD, another one that I worked with early in my career. Chronic disease, you know, just really affects every part of us. Um,
So like diabetes or other chronic illnesses, um, how do they create like a spiritual crisis?
Well, um, chronic illness, you know, increases our risk of depression and anxiety, and that's both
Hmm.
metabolic and situational. Um, we even had a name for it in diabetes. We called it diabetes distress syndrome. Um, it's just the chronic burden of that daily management, maybe the fear of further complications, especially with diabetes, the direct effect of those blood sugars fluctuating or breathing patterns or whatever it could be. And I think some guilt. You know,
Mm.
there's a lot of you should, you should, you should. If you did this, you would feel kinds of things that go
Hmm.
on, and it's not that easy. I mean, you know, uh, it it I know a great amount of my patients suffered from a lot of depression from just the guilt. Did I cause this to myself? Especially or COPD or diabetes. Did my smoking cause this? Did my weight cause this? Am I too inactive? And of course, there's those stigmas that are communicated in the public that way too. Um,
Hmm.
Emotional exhaustion is a big thing, and burnout. Um, and just the things that we ask people to do. For example, in diabetes, I always say we're going to ask you to do a lot of things you don't want to do and you don't even want to talk about. You don't want to be poking your finger and causing yourself pain to check your blood sugars. You don't want to think about your blood sugars every day. And I'm going to tell you what to eat and I'm going to talk about your weight and I'm going to tell you to exercise. And those, I don't know about you, but those aren't things I like to be confronted with. So just the self-care alone can be stigmatizing. But then I think also in the community, we get a lot of that stigma. The diabetes police are everywhere. So I really,
So how do you
go ahead.
so how do you see that the emotional psychological impact in your patient as they journey with their chronic illnesses? You've kind of shared a little bit of that, but how have you seen that?
Well, you know, I always encouraged my patients to think about their disease as a marathon and not a sprint. You know, we might have
Hmm.
short term wins, and that's great. But when we're dealing with a lifelong disease, we have to look at it as a lifelong disease. And these are things that we're going to have to change or improve long term. We need to allow ourselves uh, the grace of a new day. Um, and just really keep plodding along. Um, and find the strength inside. I used to do a program called the Five Whys, and it basically helped people identify why they need to be healthy or why they want to make changes. And it really just kind of hammers down to the very deep. They'd say, well, I just want to feel better. And I'd say, well, why do you want to feel better? Oh, because then I can be more active. Well, what will more active be for you? Well, then I will live longer. Oh, what kinds of things do you want to live longer for? Well, I just really want to make sure I see my children graduate from high school or my daughter get
Mm,
married. Okay, and what does that
mm,
look like? Well, it looks like me walking my daughter down the aisle. Okay, well, that's our long term goal. That's where we have to keep our thoughts, you know, and then really then mapping out plans to kind of work through that. That's why diabetes education was so appealing to me because I got to work with my patients forever. I have patients that I worked with starting at age 8 and now they're introducing me to their kids and grandkids. So it's fun that way.
mm,
But it's also important for them to understand that it is I'm going to be taxing. And so now not working in the hospital, I mean I could always infuse my spirituality you know, gingerly because I'm not a chaplain. I don't get to just talk about my religion unless somebody wants to ask me something pointed. But, um, now as I'm working with people, I'm able to talk about the fact that we are created in God's image and talk about the fact that
mm,
God doesn't make mistakes. And just because we feel flawed doesn't mean that we're failing, that there are
mm.
reasons unknown to us, and that we can pray and we can get strength from our beliefs. And so it's a very freeing place to be now that I can really talk that way and encourage people. I have prayed with many a patient, and I have talked about my faith with many a patient, but now it's
Mhm.
the expectation that I meet that need too. And so it is just, it's a wonderful blessing. And I feel
Yeah.
incredibly blessed to be
Well, well,
allowed into people's lives. Um, that that will never escape me because people don't
mhm.
have to confide in another person. But when they do, it is a gift. It is a gift.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, thank you very much. No, that's okay. We're going to take a break right now, but when we come back, we're going to talk about faith based support. You want to keep on listening. Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Dick Martinez. Again, we are talking with my friend and our faith community nurse, Crystal Beckman. We've been talking about like wholeness and health and mental health and how all these things are kind of intertwined, and really kind of talking about how her ministry has not only blessed our church, but how she's blessed the church at large. And so, one thing I really want Crystal to address today is why it's important for churches to talk about health at the pulpit and at Bible studies.
Yeah, well, I think that this is kind of the inverse of nursing, making sure we are addressing the whole being. the mind, body, soul. I think that that's a responsibility in our churches also. Um, you know, we can go back to old Maslow and that hierarchy of needs, and it's really hard to meet somebody or meet somebody's spiritual needs if they are starving or their health needs are not being met. We have to meet basic needs. We have to take care of those things for people to move on throughout the other issues. Now, obviously, they are all interwoven, interconnected, but it is so very important that we acknowledge those other pieces, whether it be from the pulpit or I mean, how many times have you sat in the congregation with a cold or a stomach ache and you can't really focus on what the pastor is saying to you? Or it's very hard to worship when you've got other things crowding your mind. That can be very, very apparent with a chronic illness. Just the ease of even getting to church and sitting there or standing and sitting or whatever it is. So I think it's very important to talk about the mind, body, soul relationship, and keeping that temple of ours toned up and ready to worship, but also ready to go out and live our lives too, because it isn't just one thing, not at all.
Right. You know, it oftentimes, um, when we think of Jesus Christ and we think of him healing people, right? There was teaching that would happen. So he would address things spiritually, but he didn't leave the body
No,
out.
in fact, he most
He
often um, you know cured the leper or healed or rose Lazarus from the dead before he could go out and start talking about the spiritual need. I think people are much more interested too when you address them as a whole person and not just preach your sermon. But if you are saying, I know today is a really hot day, we are having trouble in the church, we are, we need to stay hydrated, all of those things. I saw that at our Bible camp in Arizona that I was just at. Of course, it was hot, it was uncomfortable. And the start of every worship service was, okay, does everybody have their water bottle? Are we hydrated? Can we, let us take care of those physical things so we can get down to worship. Um, and I think that that's important. And not only just in the worship setting, but so people understand the connection. Because if my body isn't feeling good, I don't really care where I might be praying, but I'm praying for help. Please make me feel better instead of, the full spiritual connection.
So, what is one misconception you wish churches would unlearn when it comes to health and faith?
I think that I would like churches, but not only churches, everybody, to really stop the blame game. Um, it does nothing for our physical health, it does nothing for our emotional health, and it certainly does nothing for our spiritual health. And I don't think it's intentional. I think it just happens. Oh, look, she's overweight. Of course she has diabetes. Oh, yeah, she has nerve problems. Well, maybe if she'd get out and exercise, she wouldn't have that much, just that judgment. Um, it's something that God has really laid heavy on my heart. I try very hard not to pass judgment on people, to take them where they are. It's a personal struggle for me, because I'm human too. But I think that comes from the church also. And I just really, it burdens my heart, honestly, to see that playing out in our churches. And it's insidious. It isn't obvious. Nobody's going to say that from the pulpit, but, it can even be just, oh, well, we won't invite so-and-so because we know they can't come because they can't breathe. Well, we don't know that. And so I think just that misconception that people are to blame for their illnesses, sure, they might have contributed to them, but that's past. And now we need to minister to their future and to them on a personal level and not just as a disease.
Okay. So we'll be transitioning a little bit from there. I appreciate your wisdom in that. I will definitely keep that in mind next time I'm up preaching. Um, so I want to talk about prevention, diet, and dignity. So how do you speak to people who feel overwhelmed or judged about their eating habits?
Oh, eating habits. That's a big one. The diabetes police, or the food police, as we used to call it, are everywhere. And in fact, I used to have people hide their shopping carts from me if I'd run into them in the store. And I would always say, oh, I'm not on duty. I'm just, look, I have Cheetos, kind of thing. But ministering to people in a way that I think is non-judgmental, just saying, we need to focus on these healthy things. In fact, long before I became a faith community nurse, I used to speak for the parish nurses in the area. I'd come to their churches and do a talk that we called Toning Up Your Temple. And it was diabetes prevention, but just basically good health. And we talked about ways to keep your temple healthy. Whether you be big, small, in between, it doesn't matter. We want to be healthy in the body we're in. And that can be by promoting good, healthy eating. That I really try to not put on people something that I can't do myself. So I would never say you can never. I will say, well, if that's what you're going to do, let's figure out how to work it in or work around it. Staying active. I think when I was, and I'm not a good example because I am not one to love exercise. I prefer to have a purpose. So, maybe I have to walk to the store instead of just take a leisurely walk. But I think activity is one of probably the most important things. And, even starting that with our youth, because a lot of our youth are tied to their gadgets nowadays, and not out there just playing. I remember my mom, of course, I grew up in a small town and on a farm, and, she'd push us out the door, lock the door, and say, I'll call you for lunch. And, we just did whatever we did. Got really dirty, I remember. But I think the times have changed. Safety concerns are different, certainly, but technology is also changing that. We're kind of working our way out of physical labor in many, many aspects. And so that is a concern, and we have to think about ways to stay active.
So I've got a question that somebody is going to think about when they are thinking about healthy habits. All right. So what are some simple things that faith communities can do to encourage people to eat culturally responsible without breaking
Yeah.
the bank.
Yeah, that can be hard.
Because yeah, because some people might think of all I can eat is carrots and whole broccoli, and like our community that we're in, there it's a Latin community. So how can what are some simple ways to educate people that respects their culture and their
Yeah, I think
pocketbook?
first of all, we have to figure out what things they do eat. You know, a lot
Hmm.
of our communities now are pretty Americanized and eat, you know, that way. But our community eats a lot of chicken, a lot of rice, vegetables. They love desserts, and so do I, and sweet drinks like
Hmm.
horchata and Jamaica, all kinds of things. Nothing's better than a Coke, you know. Um, so I think just really tuning in to what people innately are going to eat. You know, what is culturally appropriate, what is maybe affordable. Rice and beans are very affordable. Beans provide great protein, you know, and I think just encouraging portion control, um, and a good, I always say we should color our plates, you know, although sometimes
Hmm.
our Latino food is pretty yellow and brown because we eat a lot of beans and rice, and you know, sometimes even our vegetables
Hmm.
are, you know, got chopped up carrots in our rice or something. But really just trying to promote balance and portion control within a cultural setting. And that goes, I used to work with a lot of Sudanese people, and they always had this bread that they basically, well, it was kind of like a tortilla actually, but they used it, you know, it was their bread and their meat soup or stew or what have you. And so we had to get creative and think about ways. But I think in the church, just being aware of that, um, you know, as the parish nurse, I try to
So
bring something healthy. I always bring a salad or something, so there's that option. But
right.
you know, just trying to promote good eating habits.
So like say, okay, let's not say, let's really say, I have diabetes. I'm at the church potluck. Can you walk me through, knowing our church, what a sample blood sugar friendly plate would
Sure,
look like?
sure. And in fact, this is what I teach when I used to teach diabetes nutrition. I always encourage people to think of a plate, like an 8-inch plate or whatever, 8-inch plate, 10-inch plate. No, no, not that plate, Dick. This plate. um,
Okay, this
and
way.
have half of that plate be vegetables and maybe a little bit of fruit. Okay? But mostly vegetables.
Okay.
A quarter of the plate be meat, and a quarter of the plate
Okay.
be starches. And in our case, it would probably be rice. A third of a cup of rice is actually a serving. And if you think that's a lot, measure it sometime. It's not a lot, it's a little bit compared to what our folks eat.
That sounds like three
Yes.
spoonfuls of rice.
Yes.
That's what that
And
sounds
very
like to me.
often we might have tortillas too. And our tortillas are not the tiny little thin ones that you buy in the store. Ours are a thicker Guatemalan tortilla. And so they are,
Oh, and they're
yes, so they're a
homemade
little bit
then.
more substantial. You might add to that a glass of milk. We don't have milk at our church ever. I've never, sir, and a lot of folks from different cultures are lactose intolerant, so that is something to think about. I think especially I work with a lot of Native Americans too, and almost all of them are lactose intolerant. Um,
A lot of African Americans are
Yep,
lactose
and a
intolerant
lot
too.
of the Latinos too. So I don't know, I guess it's us little Irish looking folks that can drink milk. Anyway, you might add that. Very often we have a diet soda. I would always opt for those people concerned about what they're eating for the diet soda or water versus the horchata or the Jamaica or whatever else drink we might have. Um, Maybe a little bit of dessert. I never want to deny somebody dessert if they want it, just a very small portion.
Okay.
And very often when I was doing my diabetes education, I would say save your sweets for between meals. Eat your food at your meal and save your sweet to another time because then you are fully enjoying that sweet. You get what you wanted, but it's not adding on to the load that you're already having.
Mhm. Okay.
And drink a lot of
Okay.
water.
So, right. I think uh, we just as Americans don't drink
Right.
enough water.
Well, although, in my travels around the globe, I would say Americans drink more water than most because our water is safer. A lot of places that we drink water.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's safe to drink,
Yeah, so,
right?
um,
So let's talk about
mhm.
some practical things that the church can do. So, can you explain the value of early screening and how churches can help promote that?
Yeah, there's been just a surge in screenings over time. And we're in a little bit of a difficult healthcare environment right now, but um, screening is important because if we wait, most of us are not going into the doctor yearly for an exam or just a health exam. In fact, most of our insurance companies and won't even cover that, and they certainly aren't going to cover lab work unless there's some suggestion that we might be at risk. So it is really a
Okay.
good idea to take advantage of any screenings that are available in the community. They're most generally free, not always, but most generally. I think very often blood sugar and blood pressure screens. We do a lot of those in the community. In fact, Sioux Falls even has a big old incentive program during the springtime. But in churches, I find it easiest to just do the screen. Just do a blood sugar screen. It's most helpful if it's fasting, but if not, uh, it's helpful to have a nurse be able to do some discussion. And of course, as a diabetes educator, I have a little bit more insight into that, even more than just some rote numbers that might be there. But blood pressure screening real important too because I don't think we realize what's going on in our body and it's very easy to say, "Oh, nothing's wrong" if we don't know. We might be feeling crappy, but if we don't know. For example, on one of the screens I more recently did, I found a gentleman with a blood sugar of 400. And in discussion
Was that where was that at? Where was that screening
at
taking
a
place?
church. Okay.
Okay.
And
So this is that practical. So this is the practical way that the churches can be
yes. And
involved in.
so I was able then to follow up with this gentleman, finding out then, of course, that he did have diabetes, but being able to make some practical suggestions to him. We actually recommended that he have a medication change, and I volunteered to facilitate that visit with his physician if need be. Um, but also was able to give him some testing equipment and help him with those supplies. So I think we can unearth things that people maybe know are an issue but don't have a way of asking. So I think it opens the door too to people feeling comfortable about asking other things. I had to take a sliver out the last time I did a screening, and I was like, oh, wait a second. Okay. They came up and they said, I know you're doing screenings, but I have this sliver and I can't get it out. Can you do it? And I'm like, sure, and it opened the door. So I think sometimes those screenings can facilitate other interactions.
Okay. So what are some ways that churches can build partnership with healthcare professionals in their
Yeah,
communities?
I think the easiest thing to do is ask the members of your church. See if there's anybody in your church that might have some expertise. It doesn't have to be a nurse. Maybe you have a physician who has some resources. Maybe you have a mental health counselor. Maybe you have a CNA who would be willing to do screenings. I mean, it doesn't have to be a formal faith community nurse or me. Um, it's nice because then they're affiliated with some resources. I am part of the faith community nursing community here in Sioux Falls, and we have monthly meetings which provide education on everything from what nursing homes are available, what home care, what reading services are available, anything you can imagine. And in fact, I'm going to be taking a certification class here starting next week for another aspect of that.
Okay.
But I think just seeing what resources you have in your own community. Maybe it's somebody who um, leads a fitness class somewhere. Maybe they could come in and do some chair fitness or lead something within your community at church too. Doing a health class, like I mentioned, we had a CPR class not too long ago, and what did we unearth? We unearthed that our AED wasn't working in our church just from that CPR
Which is
class.
very
So
important.
and we have 3 churches meeting in our building, so that was a real important thing. But I think some of those health topics. I know, Dick, you led uh, um, uh, mental health or suicide awareness for our youth group. So there are needs throughout every age, and I think the first thing to do is see what your resources are within your own church. And if you have somebody that will really spearhead that, pastors don't have time, church board really doesn't have time. Um, they probably don't even really have it. I mean, our church is filled with chaplains, so we have a good medical base. But other churches, the pastor doesn't even want to do the hospital calls. So, that's another thing. If you have somebody with a gift for calling on folks in the hospital or when they get home, or maybe in my former church, I was a Lutheran girl for many, many years, and our parish nurse. Are you okay?
Yeah, there's a fly, man, and I've been trying to avoid it, but that time it was like right
Oh,
here.
no,
Sorry
it's
about
okay.
that.
We're human. Um, our parish nurse was very instrumental in visiting the sick. In fact, she brought soup to everybody who was maybe hospitalized or had a serious illness. And it was wonderful. I would love to start something like that in our church. But it can't just be one person. So even if you have a faith
Right.
community nurse or somebody designated, it takes a team. And very often with me, I grab one of my friends, Claudia or Nancy, to go with me so they can interpret. Because, I can speak Spanish, but sometimes the conversation gets a little deeper than my Spanish can go. And or maybe their statements to me I don't quite understand. So you might need that. Um, it but I think using your resources within your church first and then looking for more. But it's really fun for me to connect the dots. I love to connect people to each other, and and I'll say, "Oh, you know what? I heard about this place that I think I can get a wheelchair for you. Let me call them." And and then orchestrating that is so fun and so rewarding and very, very needed because, I mean, when you are experiencing a chronic disease or an illness, even a short term one, or your child is ill or what have you, you don't have time to be doing all that footwork. And so if somebody can
Right.
help you, that is wonderful.
Well, thank you very much, Crystal, for sharing that information with us. We're going to go ahead and take a little break, but when we come back, Crystal's going to share with us some final reflections. Hello, I'm Dick Montanez, and if you have enjoyed this presentation, I invite you to subscribe to this channel for future episodes. It is my goal, my hope, and my prayer to get resources out into the church community so that we can provide hope for those in crisis. Again, thank you very much and have a blessed day. Hello, I'm Dick with Crisis Compass. We've been interviewing my dear friend Crystal Beckman, who is an RN, a diabetic educator, a faith community nurse, and we've just been getting some practical advice on how to take care of the body, therefore taking care of the mind as well. And so I just want to express appreciation for you doing this with us today. If there were some final reflections you wanted to share with us, like what gives you hope or an encouragement, at least one to leave with our listeners, what would that be?
Well, I think, my hope is in Christ. So
Amen.
that is where I pull all my energy, all my thoughts, and hopefully my actions come from that hope. But I think the fact that we have podcasts like this, we are feeling more comfortable about speaking about health and especially mental health is giving me hope because we are in a dark time. And never has it been more apparent to me that people need to look at their whole selves, incorporating their spirituality with their mental health and with their physical health, because they all affect each other. They all interact positively and negatively with each other. And I have hope in the future that we are going to continue this journey, that people are not going to be afraid of talking about the things that are affecting them, and that people within our faith communities are able to accept that and minister to that, and minister to people as a full person, whatever their needs may be.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And for my listeners, we appreciate you listening. This is our first entry. It won't be our last. We look forward to providing resources not only for mental health, but for those who are in chaplaincy, those who are in ministry, and those who are just looking for ways to support people in crisis in the church community. You have a good rest of your day, Crystal.
Thank you.
This won't be the last time we talk. I think there are other things that we can talk about when it comes to health and mental health that I'd like for you to share with us. So I hope you will not be a stranger.
Thank you.
All right. God bless you and have a good rest of your day.